Okay guys, welcome to another episode as part of Badass Media Production Season 4. So in this episode I'm going to be looking at the Back to the Future trilogy, mainly the first two films to be more precise, mainly because I'm going to be looking at the character of Biff. Why I feel Biff is one of the best and most underrated sci-fi villains we've ever seen in the time travel type narrative. Okay, so let's look at Biff as a character. He's very much a common bully, something we don't often see with a time traveling narrative or sci-fi narrative. Usually with sci-fi villains, they're usually, cybernetic humans or alien overlords. That's what we often see in sci-fi movies, but with Biff we see his common type bully, his common type douchebag, and it makes for such a unique experience. This video will contain spoilers, so I want to look at Back to the Future and Back to the Future Part 2 in great detail, so I'm gonna have to spoil both films. Okay, so when we first see Biff, we see him in Marty McFly's home, and of course he's giving George McFly a hard time. He's very much, being both verbal and physical towards him, and of course this doesn't stop when Marty McFly enters the room, which kind of says a lot about Biff's character, that he's not afraid to bully a man in front of his own son, and that says a lot about him as a character. From the get-go, he's a character who seems relatable. He could be like a common co-worker or a rude neighbor we've dealt with in the past, so this makes him incredibly relatable sci-fi villain to the viewers. Okay, so of course during the events of Back to the Future, Marty McFly goes back to 1955, in which he sees younger versions of both his mother and his father, and of course Biff. And Biff is once again the hot-headed type character that he was in the present day, but he's also a type of character who believes he can get whatever he wants. And while in the 1950s, we see that he's very much an antagonist towards both Marty's mom and of course Marty's dad. And once again we see him giving George McFly a horrible time in the 1950s, and this really makes Biff very much a personal villain towards Marty, because he is giving both his parents a horrible experience. When we do get the wonderful payoff towards the end of the film, it's done really well, because we see George's suffering and we see this wonderful build-up. So when George finally knocks out Biff, it's such a wonderful payoff, and a payoff that serves so well to the plot. But of course the timeline is changed, and of course in the alternative 1980s in which Marty McFly returns to, we see that Biff is very much a wimpy, cowardly character, and it's the perfect solution towards his character without of course killing him. And I think it was a genius move bringing Biff back for Part 2, because Biff, once again I mention it, he's very much a personal villain towards the McFly family. In Back to the Future Part 2 we see kind of three incarnations of Biff. We see him in the very opening of the film very much being the kind of cowardly character that we see in the very end of the first film, and then of course we see him in the future in the year 2015, in which he's kind of older, more cunning, very much a self-centered character. And this makes for a very different version of Biff, and a very interesting version of Biff, how he uses Marty's own plan against him, and using of course the sports manual against him, and warping the future so that Biff's present day will be perfect, so that he can truly build an empire and truly become a much more powerful version of Biff. And this is what we do see in Back to the Future Part 2. We see a much more smarter, much more cunning version of Biff, and it makes for such an interesting experience. We see that he's a lot darker than we see him in the first film. His goals are much more extreme, and we see that he has killed George McFly, which shows you how dark Biff can be. And he also was willing to kill Marty McFly with the same gun that killed his father. That makes for such a unique growth in Biff's character from Part 1 to Part 2. And of course Marty McFly, he returns to 1955. He rechanges the past in order to restore his version of present day. Okay, so let's look at Biff as a character. Okay, so we see several different versions of Biff, right? We see, of course, in the first film, we see him present day, 1985. Biff, very much this cocky, arrogant, doofus type character who belittles George McFly every chance he gets. And then of course we see him in 1955, in which he's very much a cocky, arrogant, youthful teenager who believes he can get whatever he wants. And then, of course, in the very end of Back to the Future 1, we see him as this wimpy, cowardly character who is very much afraid of George McFly. And then, of course, in part 2, we see him as a very different version of his character, a cunning, much more devilish character. And then, of course, his version, the alternative 1985, in which Biff is powerful, is the darkest incarnation of Biff we've seen. And this is just incredible, seeing this different kind of varieties of this one villain, and it makes for such an interesting experience. I also want to mention that Biff doesn't come off as an intelligent villain, which is also very interesting, because when we think of the time-traveling narrative, you think of villains who are very intelligent, world-dominating kind of villains who are masters of their own fate. We don't see that with Biff. We see a slightly more intelligent version of Biff, but not a genius version of Biff in part 2. Also, I'd like to mention that Biff brings a lot of the best sense of humour to the Back to the Future trilogy. He gets some incredible one-liners and a lot of incredible funny moments, and I feel that Thomas F. Wilson, he brings so much to the character. He brings so much range to the character. And I'm just going to say one final note. It isn't just Christopher Lloyd and it isn't just Michael J. Fox that brings so much to the Back to the Future trilogy. I'm going to have to say Thomas Wilson brings so much to the character as Biff in the Back to the Future trilogy. Okay, then, guys, that's my rant about Back to the Future. How do you feel about Biff's character in Back to the Future? Do you think he's a good villain or a bad villain? Do you feel that they should have changed the villains in the sequels? What's your favourite Back to the Future film? What's your favourite Back to the Future moment? Put down in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you like what you see.